You can see this is white spruce. It's very tall actually. It typically doesn't get this tall, those of you who are familiar with it. So right away we're sort of guessing that this is a very productive site. And you can also sort of observe when you're here, there is some deadfall, you know, the stand's starting to decline. If we look in the back, we can see a gap that's already opened up with some regen starting to happen. We call this an old field stand, and one of the tools we use is the FEC guide. So we've got our veg type. Now, we've got the fact sheet for the soil type here, ST8. Big things we'd be looking for. A typical forest soil in Nova Scotia, you're going to see a grade AE layer. But here we're on an old field site, so you've got that nice brown, rich looking AH layer, which that's pretty typical of an ST8. And so that helps build the story that we're into an old field stand.
I don't know if anybody remember taking soils in your science classes or anything like that, but I mean within your soil profile, right, there's different horizons, your A and then your B and then your C, which is your bedrock. So basically, you know, that top horizon, that A horizon really tells you a lot about the richness or the productive capability of your piece of ground. So here with that AH, what that means is there's a lot of biomixing, there's a lot of organic material in that top horizon. There could even be some earthworms here too as well. That really is more rich. Now versus like that's an AH versus an AE, which is like you were saying, like that gray kind of look to it. Basically what that is it's really, usually you see that in softwood stands with a lot of needles, a lot of acidic kind of like needles of vegetation. So what's happening is basically the nutrients and the minerals are being leached down to the next horizon and to the B horizon. So here, like right off when we see the AH, it's like, oh yeah, this is a rich site. And even in our soil profile, it's important to get down to at least 50 centimeters to see if we're going to hit any clay. Because clay is another thing, that's another sign of increased richness basically, because clay can easily hold on nutrients a lot easier and also hold on moisture a lot easier than your more sandy soils, which are very porous, and it tends to drain very quickly.
And you can see the richness in the height of the trees here as well, right?
What we're doing is we're trying to identify our veg types and our soil types to come to our ecosite to what this site is capable of producing or the species suitability. But I mean, there's other work within the Department of Natural Resources on their nutrient budget modeling to kind of try to understand, based on your ecosite, you know, understanding more about the soil, what is the proper removal so you're not affecting that productivity level that it should be, you know, able to produce. An old forester told me, you know, you should at least have 20% hardwoods in your woods to help for that nutrient replenishment, you know, the build up of organic matter. So it's really important to encourage those hardwood components in your woods for that reason, for that nutrient cycling. It's an annual thing. It's so important to understand more of what you have in the woods, in nature. It always knows to, you know, grow whatever vegetation it can to cover up the forest soil. So that's where you get a lot of your early succession species, you know, your pin cherry, your gray birch, balsam fir, red maple, you know, your raspberries, all those ground vegetation, they just come in, they cover it quickly. And then over time it kind of builds up. And if you have a good, you know, whatever seed sources you have, and then over time it'll go from those early stages of succession to your mid, maybe you have more red maples, and, you know, maybe your spruces start to move in, and then move to your late, which is like your tolerant hardwoods, your sugar maples, ash, beech, you know, and maybe some of your hemlock. So we got to remember that forest time is a really long time, like 300 years, right? So, and I mean, our lifespan is really short. It's really just a fraction of the forest time, and we always want to see results quickly. But we've always got to remember that forest time is a long time. And that's why it's so important to have a long-term outlook. The more species and structural diversity you have in your forest, the better in terms of its resilience and being able to at least limit the amount of impact from, you know, fires, wind, insects, you know, drought, you know, all these kinds of things. We got to be very mindful of that, especially if it's close to your home, you know, like, you know, might want to encourage more hardwood, you know, composition, and, you know, prune up your trees so you don't have those lateral branching, all those kinds of things. You know, there's a lot of what's it called, fire smart kind of protocol that you can take to kind of really limit that chance. And I will say too, the more prone times of the year for like fire would be like before green up, right, in the spring, you know, once your snow's gone, before everything's greened up. that always tended to be like the higher risk kind of time for fire, but now that's kind of like gone out the window. Like you say, you know, because last spring was incredibly dry in May and June, and then it was wet for a couple of months, so I guess it balanced out. But the theme of what you'll get from today is really the diversity and how important diversity is in your forests, in your woods, and certainly even your own home. Way back when, like our American beech used to be a really prevalent, one of our main commercial hardwood species, and then the canker disease came in, and basically then sugar maple kind of took that place. I think there'll be a shift kind of in those sites on what will kind of take its place. But it is, I mean, hemlock, because it does live so long, even longer than red spruce, it's going to be quite an ecological impact for sure. The Silviculture Guide to the Ecological Matrix. This is basically a management tool, a management guide. Once we do our data collection in the field, we go through a series of keys, depending on the forest group or the vegetation type you're in. We go through a series of keys which comes to our prescription.
Taking a group of mature trees and removing them and hoping that new regeneration is going to establish in that gap, which is sort of mimicking what's happening naturally in the stand as we see over there.
We would place our gaps in close proximity to where the white pine are, or the red maple, or any of the desired species that we could find. Or maybe even areas where it's sufficiently regenerated, like over there, and maybe just try to take some of the overstory off without damaging the regeneration, just to kind of give that kind of invigorate it, right, to kind of speed up its growth. We go and we assess the area, get that detailed information as like a pre-assessment, and then we come to a prescription that makes sense for the landowner and for the land. Okay, so then what we do is we form what we call a harvest plan or harvest proposal, and then we meet with that landowner, even walk through the woods, and we kind of explain to them kind of what we have in mind, kind of what we're envisioning to be done, and then again, what's the follow-up going to be, you know, over the long term. Because remember, you always got to think about that. It's not just about what you do today, it's about what you're trying to achieve in that long-term goals over time. And with Acadian forest restoration, is this really trying again to build that diversity back. You know, if you get the seed trees there, you know, work with them, try to regenerate the stand naturally. And then if you don't have the seed sources, maybe think about introducing them, like through planting or whatnot, again, to get to more of the diverse, true Acadian forest mix. We come out to the site with the contractor and we explain to him what it is that we want done, and we show him the maps and whatnot. And then they say, okay, I can do this. And then I ask them, what do you need as a harvesting rate or whatnot to do this work? Then the next step after that is then we actually lay out the site. You know, we make sure the property boundary lines are well readily visible. We lay out the block boundary. Even here we may go as far as actually mark the patches or the gaps to be created. We also would identify any sensitive sites. If there was any seepages in here, we would actually put a buffer along that forested wetland, because forested wetlands are very important in terms of biodiversity. And actually, you know, even for this project, for the Family Forest Network project, we'd even back up some so that we would engage the Mersey Tobiotic Research Institute in doing a biodiversity assessment here. I mean, because us as foresters, we have some idea, but those guys are the experts. And we have done that in the past for just some of our traditional kind of partial harvest work that we do. And really the results and recommendations from them then helps us refine our recommendations. Maybe they've seen something here that we didn't even notice or consider. Or maybe they know that there's species at risk here somewhere in some kind of special habitat. So then we build that into the harvest recommendation or the prescription. The migratory bird season, nesting season, is in the spring. When those guys come up from down south, they come up here to nest. So you got to be really mindful, and I always try to recommend, especially in areas where you know that they are, and again, that's help with MTRI, is not to operate during the nesting season. So that's like May, June, and July, basically, if you can help it. Another big part of this is access. Okay, how are you going to access the site? How are you going to extract the wood? Where are you going to put the wood? You need to be able to get a logging truck in here to get the wood, to bring it to market. So there's all these different things you got to think about. And the contractor will ask that. It's like, okay, what are your plans? Where's the landing going to go? Where do you see the main extraction trail going, kind of thing. I mean, overall, this is still mostly well-drained soil. And it's like the soil type 8, the fresh medium coarse textured. There's no clay component, so actually there is low compaction and rutting hazards. However, if you get a big rain event or it rains for a couple months, then the soil will act differently. So you really got to be kind of mindful, right, to on your timing of the harvest. That's where the damage occurs, is the actual extraction of the wood. The contractors that we work with, we always ask them, you know, please incorporate it in your harvest rate if you need to park your forwarder for a day or two, just to limit ground disturbance. Or if you need to put the brush from the cut trees, put the brush in those kind of sensitive spots, you know, that takes time. So that needs to be incorporated in their rate or whatnot to, again, to ensure that ground disturbance is limited. Small private woodlots, a lot of these jobs are small, right? So if there's a way that you can, group those in a similar area or something to make it more attractive, but still, and it's not only like the amount of volume, but volume of what? Like the product volume, right? It all needs to be saleable products. So like, you know, logs, studwood, you know, firewood, and all those sorts of things. So even in this stand here, you know, where we walk through, you know, it's questionable, right? Because a lot of the white spruce is declining. A lot of the white spruces already fell out. The spruce that are dead and already on the ground or standing, you know, that economic value is lost. So, you know, then is there enough volume here? Because it's still going to be a partial cut. This is not going to be a liquidation or anything. It's just going to be systematic patches. So it needs to make sense for them. So this site, it's so marginal. That's why we thought it would be a great trial through the Family Forest Network to kind of, you know, consider all those things and what is the cost of doing that. And what it is the contractor then, instead of getting paid by the ton, by a per unit volume, they get paid by the hour. So it takes all the risk out for them. Because I don't think everyone really realizes it, but in doing operations, it's the contractor that takes most of the risk. They take all the risks. They have, you know, they have all that gear, they employ so many people. There's a lot of risks that they, you know, so they want to make sure that they'll be able to make a go at it, right? So, I mean, there will be some damage, but still, you're really trying to limit it as much as possible, knowing what you're doing is you're trying to set the stage for more regeneration to establish. Another important point I want to make is within that gap, it doesn't mean you need to cut everything. If there's a nice young red spruce or a nice young maple or something, you're not mowing that down too, right? But still, that's something you need to communicate in your operations. If you tree mark it or flag it or just let them know. Some of our harvest operations, the landowner's like, look, I'd really like to have any hardwood, firewood from this operation. So basically what they do is they just kind of basically, you know, pay to have it, you know, for the harvest and extraction rate, which is kind of deducted from their overall stumpage, and then they get to keep their 10 cords of firewood or whatnot. But well, I guess what I'm getting at is we're really flexible. It's flexible. Because it's really important for us as, you know, forest managers, forest professionals, to really take the time to understand what the goals and objectives are for your, you know, for the woodlot owners and for their land. Because then that helps us, together with the forest inventory, what you have, to what the what the appropriate recommendation, what activity should be. The theme of the day is the best way in any natural disturbance or climate change or whatnot is diversity. Species and structural diversity. Like last year in that big inferno, like it didn't just like a big hurricane. You could have done all the best management in the world. When you get faced against that, you're done.